Commander Vazix of the Galactic Union adjusted his ocular enhancers, squinting at the data streaming across his command console. They come from a Category 12 Deathworld. Is this some kind of practical joke? He glanced at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Neeler, whose 3 eyes were all wide with confirmation. No joke. Pulse Commander. Planet designation Earth gravity at 1.2 standard units. Temperature fluctuations from -40 to +45 degrees on their Celsius scale. Active tectonic activity. Atmospheric oxygen content at 21%. Predator density in the upper 8th percentile. Neeler paused, mandibles clicking nervously. And they've achieved FTL travel using principles our scientists considered theoretically impossible just 3 standard cycles ago. Vazix tapped his claw against the metallic surface of his chair. And the Council wants us to make first contact with these, what do they call themselves? Humans, Neeler replied, pronouncing the word carefully through his translator. Though they have numerous tribal designations as well. Apparently they haven't even achieved planetary unification, yet they've somehow managed spaceflight. He laughed, a bubbling sound like water going down a drain. Can you believe that? Still fighting among themselves, and they decided to come to the stars. The absolute madness. Commander Vazix wasn't laughing. Deathworlders were rare in the Galactic Union for good reason. Evolution on high gravity, high oxygen worlds with extreme biodiversity created species with problematic tendencies. The last Deathworlders they'd encountered, the Ragnar, had required a 17-cycle pacification campaign before they would even consider diplomacy. Have they at least sent their diplomatic contingent as requested? Vazix asked, pulling up the visual feed from Docking Bay 7. The image crystallized, showing 5 bipedal figures standing with perfect posture beside their sleek, utilitarian vessel. No decorative plumage, no ceremonial weapons, just simple, form-fitting garments in dark colors. Practical. Efficient. They call that one Captain Thorne, Neeler said, pointing to the central figure. Military designation, not diplomatic. They insisted on a security detail for their ambassador. Vazix studied the human called Thorne. The creature stood completely still, eyes constantly scanning, hands resting lightly at its sides. Despite being surrounded by the marvels of Galactic Union architecture, crystalline spires that had made dignitaries from 1,000 worlds gasp in awe, this human looked bored. No, something else. They're assessing defensive positions, Vazix suddenly realized, feeling a chill run through his exoskeleton. Those aren't diplomats with security. Those are warriors escorting a diplomat. Surely you're being paranoid, Commander. What could 5 soft-skinned primates possibly? We're about to find out, Vazix interrupted, rising from his seat. And may the eternal void help us if we've miscalculated. The Grand Reception Chamber of Station Proxima Centauri was a testament to Galactic Union engineering. Vaulted ceilings stretched 50 meters high, embedded with luminescent crystals harvested from the heart of dying stars. Representatives from 27 species mingled beneath floating gravity platforms where musicians played harmonic convergence symphonies. It was, by any civilized standard, spectacular. Ambassador Elena Chen of Earth looked thoroughly unimpressed. Your security protocols are inadequate, she stated flatly to the hovering protocol droid. 6 entrance points with minimal screening, exposed ventilation ducts large enough for small drones, and I count at least 12 species here whose biochemistry is toxic to humans through mere skin contact. Captain Thorne stood 2 paces behind her, eyes constantly moving. The other 3 human security specialists, Rodriguez, Patel, and Jackson, had positioned themselves in a triangle formation around their ambassador. Commander Vazix approached, his ceremonial cape billowing behind him. Ambassador Chen, welcome to Proxima Station. I assure you, in 3,000 years of diplomatic gatherings, we have never experienced a security breach. He gestured grandly at the assembled dignitaries. You are perfectly safe here. Rodriguez coughed into his hand, a sound suspiciously like suppressed laughter. Commander, with all due respect, Ambassador Chen began, but she never finished her sentence. The first explosion tore through the eastern wall of the chamber, sending shards of iridescent material flying across the room. Screams erupted as delegates from low-gravity worlds were thrown like ragdolls by the concussive force. Krell raiders bellowed the station's emergency system. This is not a drill. All non-combat personnel evacuate immediately. "Oh, never experienced a security breach," Jackson shouted above the chaos, already moving into a defensive position. "Gotta love the irony." Vazix stared in horror as armored figures poured through the breach, weapon systems glowing with charged plasma. The Krell vicious mercenaries known throughout the sector for their brutality had somehow bypassed the station's much-vaunted defense grid. "Ambassador, behind me now," Captain Thorne barked, drawing what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon from beneath his diplomatic jacket. The other humans followed suit, forming a tight perimeter around Chen, and surprisingly, Commander Vazix himself. "What are you doing?" Vazix hissed, his translator struggling with his panic-stricken vocalization. "We need to run." "No time," Patel replied, her weapon already tracking the first Krell raiders. "They've cut off the main exit. Standard ambush protocol." The Krell commander stepped forward, his translator broadcasting across the chamber. "Representatives of the Galactic Union, your pathetic peace is at an end. The Krell hegemony claims this station and all resources within. Surrender your diplomatic access codes or die where you stand." Ambassador Chen glanced at Thorne, something unspoken passing between them. Then she straightened her shoulders and addressed the Krell commander directly. "Earth does not recognize your authority, nor your threats," she stated with remarkable calm. "You have exactly 30 seconds to withdraw your forces before we consider this an act of war against humanity." The Krell commander's response was a barking laugh that needed no translation. "The Deathworlders wish to negotiate. Perhaps your species' reputation is exaggerated. You are 5 against 50. What possible threat could you pose?" Rodriguez grinned, an expression that sent a chill down Vazix's spine despite the rising temperature in the chamber. "Sir," he said to Thorne, checking something on his wrist device, "permission to demonstrate." Captain Thorne nodded once. "Just like Jakarta, people. Clean, quick, and by the book." Vazix felt his legs wobble beneath him as he realized what was about to happen. These humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They were preparing to fight. 20 seconds, Krell Commander Ambassador Chen called out, her voice steady. "This is your final warning." The Krell commander raised his plasma rifle in response, aiming directly at the human delegation. "May the void have mercy," Vazix whispered, certain he was about to witness the slaughter of Earth's first diplomatic mission. He couldn't have been more wrong. The Krell commander fired. The plasma bolt that should have struck Ambassador Chen instead sizzled through empty air. In the milliseconds between the weapon's charging whine and discharge, Captain Thorne had already shoved both the ambassador and Commander Vazix to the floor. Now Thorne shouted, and the world erupted into controlled chaos. Rodriguez slapped something on his wrist controller. Instantly, the chamber's lighting system overloaded, plunging the vast space into near darkness. Only emergency strips along the floor provided any illumination at all. "What happening?" Vazix stammered, his species' poor low-light vision rendering him practically blind. "Basic tactical advantage," Commander Chen explained calmly, as if discussing weather patterns rather than an ongoing firefight. "Krell optical systems are calibrated for bright environments. We're leveraging that." Vazix heard rather than saw what happened next. Short, staccato bursts from the humans' weapons. Not energy weapons, something louder, more primitive. Projectiles. They were using kinetic weapons in a space station. "Are you insane?" he shrieked. One missed shot could breach the hull. Thorne's voice came from somewhere to his left. "Specialized ammunition, Commander. Designed to fragment on impact with organic tissue but flatten against hull material. We're not idiots." From across the chamber came agonized Krell screaming. Not one or two voices, many. Rodriguez, Patel, Quadrant 2, Thorne commanded. "Jackson, cover the ambassador. Commander Vazix, stay down and try not to get in our way." Through the darkness, Vazix could make out small points of light moving across the chamber, targeting lasers from the humans' weapons, he realized. Each one found a Krell raider with unerring precision. "How can they even see?" Lieutenant Neeler whispered beside him, having apparently crawled over during the confusion. A Krell raider suddenly loomed above them, plasma weapon glowing hot. Before either alien could react, Jackson appeared as if from nowhere, moving with impossible speed. 3 precise strikes: throat, knee joint, weapon arm, and the Krell collapsed, unconscious or dead. Augmented vision, Jackson explained casually, as if he hadn't just neutralized a feared galactic mercenary with his bare hands. Earth's pretty dim compared to the Krell homeworld. We adapted. Across the chamber, Captain Thorne was implementing what Vazix would later learn was called divide and conquer. Using just hand signals and what appeared to be subvocal communications, the 5 humans were systematically separating the Krell raiders into smaller groups, then neutralizing them with ruthless efficiency. "This is impossible," Neeler muttered, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "There are only 5 of them against an entire Krell raiding party." 6, Ambassador Chen corrected, suddenly beside them. Vazix hadn't even heard her approach. "I qualified top of my class at the academy before entering diplomatic service." As if to demonstrate, she smoothly drew a slim weapon from her sleeve and fired twice over their heads. A gurgling sound followed by a heavy thud confirmed another Krell neutralized. Captain Chen called out, "They're regrouping at the north entrance. Looks like they're bringing in reinforcements." Thorne's voice came back immediately. "Acknowledged. Rodriguez, how's that surprise coming along?" Rodriguez's laugh echoed from somewhere near the chamber's environmental controls. "Ready when you are, Captain. Those Krell Enviro suits have terrible electromagnetic shielding, almost like they never expected anyone to hack them." Vazix felt his antennae twitch in disbelief. "You can't hack Krell battle armor. Their systems are completely isolated from external signals." Patel's voice floated through the darkness, punctuated by the sound of her weapon discharging. "Maybe from your external signals, Commander. But we humans have been finding backdoors into systems since we invented computers. It's practically a national pastime." "Execute," Thorne commanded. Rodriguez pressed something on his wrist device. Suddenly, every Krell environmental suit in the chamber began emitting a piercing alarm. Their heads-up displays flashed with emergency warnings, and their weapon systems shut down simultaneously. "What did you do?" gasped Vazix. Thorne appeared beside him, helping the commander to his feet as the emergency lights began to restore some visibility to the chamber. The scene was astonishing. Krell raiders lay scattered across the floor, some unconscious, others struggling with malfunctioning armor that now seemed to be constricting around them. "We convinced their suit systems that they were experiencing catastrophic atmospheric contamination," Thorne explained, sounding almost bored. "Standard emergency protocol locked their suits and disabled weapons to prevent explosive decompression. Basic exploit, really. Your security team should be able to collect them now." Vazix stared at the human captain, finally understanding what he was witnessing. This wasn't luck or desperation. This was calculated, precise, and terrifyingly effective combat doctrine. "But there are more coming," he reminded them, hearing the heavy footfalls of Krell reinforcements approaching from the north corridor. Captain Thorne smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "Good," he said simply. "Now we can show you what happens when humans actually have time to prepare. We need to move the diplomats," Captain Thorne announced, surveying the grand reception chamber with calculating eyes. "This position is too exposed. Rodriguez, what's our best defensive option?" Rodriguez pulled up a holographic map of the station from his wrist device, the blue light casting eerie shadows across his face. "Maintenance sublevel 3. Single access point, reinforced walls for radiation containment." And he grinned. "Environmental controls we can manipulate." Ambassador Chen nodded. "Agreed. Commander Vazix, we need to evacuate everyone there immediately." Vazix's mandibles clicked in agitation. "That's a restricted area. It's not designed for." "It's designed to not explode if the station gets hit," Patel interrupted, checking her weapon, "which makes it better than here. Unless you've got a better idea." Lieutenant Neeler had managed to gather most of the diplomatic contingent into a huddled mass of terrified, multi-limbed bureaucrats. The Trill ambassador's color-shifting skin was stuck in a panicked swirl of neon yellow, while the gelatinous Morphin diplomat had stress divided into 3 quivering smaller versions of himself. "We cannot possibly outrun Krell warriors," protested the Vreen ambassador, his eye stalks trembling. "Their exomusculature allows them to move at 3 times our maximum speed." Jackson smiled, patting the alien's shoulder with surprising gentleness. "They'd have to catch us first, sir. And we're about to make sure they're looking in all the wrong places." Thorne moved with purpose to the chamber's central control panel. "Rodriguez, patch me into the station's communication grid." "Ambassador Chen, I need authorization to access emergency protocols." Chen pressed her palm against the console's biometric scanner. Earth Diplomatic Override Sierra Echo Victor Echo November. Full access granted to Captain Marcus Thorne. Authorization Blue Tempest. Vazix watched in astonishment as the station's systems immediately recognized the override codes that, technically speaking, shouldn't even exist for a species making first contact. You came prepared for this, he realized. You expected to be attacked. Ambassador Chen's expression remained neutral. Commander, humanity learned a long time ago that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. When peaceful means fail, we resort to the other options, finished Thorne, fingers flying across the console. Station-wide evacuation protocols initiated. Automated distress signals broadcasting on all frequencies. And there. False biosignature readings activated throughout levels 5 through 12. Rodriguez whistled appreciatively, making it look like everyone fled upward. Nice. Oldest trick in the book, Thorne replied. Now, we move. Single file formation, civilians in the center. Jackson on point, Patel on rear guard. Move out. What followed was the most surreal 30 minutes of Commander Vazix's life. The human security team moved through the station like ghosts, somehow knowing exactly when to advance and when to hide. Twice they narrowly avoided Krell patrols, the humans seeming to sense the approaching danger before any detection equipment registered it. Natural predator instinct, Rodriguez explained in a whisper, noticing Vazix's confusion. On Earth, if you can't tell when something's hunting you, you don't survive long enough to reproduce. When they finally reached maintenance sublevel 3, Jackson quickly rigged the single entrance with what appeared to be primitive but effective traps. Motion sensors tied to focused EMP bursts, he explained to the curious Trill ambassador, whose fear had given way to fascination. Won't kill them, but it'll fry their suit electronics. After that, well, he patted his weapon affectionately. Inside the maintenance level, Captain Thorne had transformed the space into a defensible position with alarming speed. Cargo containers created choke points. Environmental systems were rerouted to give them control over temperature, oxygen levels, and humidity, all factors the humans assured them could be weaponized if necessary. The Krell will figure out our location eventually, Thorne explained to the assembled diplomats. When they do, they'll come in force. Our objective is simple: hold this position until Union reinforcements arrive. That could be hours, wailed the Morphin diplomat, all three of his stress-divided bodies jiggling in distress. The Krell will overwhelm us long before then. To everyone's surprise, it was Ambassador Chen who laughed. With all due respect, Ambassador, you obviously haven't spent much time with humans, she turned to Captain Thorne. Hours, Captain. Think we can manage? Thorne's smile was predatory. Longest I've ever held a position was 73 hours in the Atacama Desert conflict. No water, limited ammo, against forces that outnumbered us 20-1. What happened? Asked Neeler, almost afraid to hear the answer. The enemy retreated, Thorne said simply. As if on cue, the proximity alarms Jackson had installed began to wail. Rodriguez checked his scanner and whistled low. We've got company, Captain. Lots of it. Looks like they found us faster than expected. I count at least 30 signatures approaching the sublevel access corridor. Patel checked her ammunition and exchanged a look with Jackson. 30 against 5. Hardly seems fair. You're right, Jackson replied with a grin. Maybe we should send one of us away to make it even. The sound of heavy Krell footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Commander Vazix felt his exoskeleton tighten with fear. We're going to die here, he whispered. Captain Thorne chambered a round in his weapon, the mechanical sound somehow more frightening than any energy weapon's whine. No, Commander, they are going to die here, and you're about to learn why humans come from a Deathworld. He nodded to his team, who took up positions with practiced precision. Remember Jakarta, he told them quietly. Make every shot count. And then the Krell breached the outer door, and hell itself seemed to pour into the corridor. 2 hours into the siege, Commander Vazix had witnessed enough to fill a lifetime of nightmares, or perhaps, more accurately, to populate an entirely new mythology. The first wave of Krell raiders had been decimated by Jackson's entrance traps. The second wave learned from their mistakes but fell to precisely aimed shots from positions that seemed impossible to target. The third wave actually breached the inner perimeter, only to discover that humans excelled at hand-to-hand combat in ways that defied comprehension. Rodriguez had a dislocated shoulder. He'd popped it back into place himself with a sickening crunch, laughed through gritted teeth, and returned to his position without missing a beat. Patel had a plasma burn across her left thigh. She'd cauterized it with her own knife, heated to glowing by pressing it against an exposed power conduit. She hadn't even screamed. "Is this normal for your species?" Vazix asked Ambassador Chen, who was calmly applying some kind of medical spray to a gash on Jackson's forehead. Normal. Chen considered the question. "I suppose so. Humans have an extraordinary tolerance for pain. Evolutionary adaptation from our predator days, combined with our body's ability to produce natural painkillers under stress. Adrenaline, endorphins, powerful cocktail." Jackson winced as the spray stung his wound. "Plus, we're stubborn as hell. My grandmother used to say humans are too stupid to know when we're beaten." "Not stupid," corrected Thorne, checking their dwindling ammunition supplies. "Optimistic. There's always a way out if you're creative enough." He frowned at their inventory. "We're down to 30% ammo reserves. Rodriguez, options." Rodriguez glanced around the maintenance level, eyes scanning the equipment and supplies. "Environmental systems, Captain. We can weaponize them." "Explain," Thorne commanded. Vazix watched in fascination as Rodriguez limped to the environmental control panel, his dislocated then relocated arm moving with only slight stiffness. "This station is designed for multiple species," Rodriguez explained, "which means the atmospheric controls are incredibly precise and adaptable. The Krell environmental suits are designed to protect against vacuum and radiation, but they're calibrated for standard atmospheric conditions." He pulled up the station schematics. "If we crank the humidity to maximum while dropping the temperature to near freezing, we can create a super dense fog. Their targeting systems will be useless." Patel nodded, catching on. "And if we simultaneously increase the oxygen content, everything becomes more flammable," finished Jackson with a wolfish grin. "I like where this is going." Commander Vazix felt his antennae twitch in alarm. "You're going to set the air on fire. That's insanity." "That's tactical thinking," corrected Ambassador Chen. "Using available resources to create an advantage." Thorne was already moving. "Patel, help Rodriguez recalibrate the environmental systems. Jackson, collect anything flammable or explosive. Commander Vazix, get your people as far from the entrance as possible and prepare for rapidly changing conditions." The alien diplomats huddled together in the farthest corner, watching in stunned silence as the humans prepared what amounted to an environmental death trap. "Has anyone noticed," whispered the Trill ambassador, her skin now a worried shade of blue-green, "that they're actually enjoying this?" Vazix had noticed. The humans moved with purpose, yes, but there was something else, a gleam in their eyes, an energy in their movements. They were exhausted, injured, vastly outnumbered, and they were thriving. "Where I come from," Jackson explained as he rigged makeshift incendiary devices from maintenance chemicals, "we have a saying: pressure makes diamonds. Humans perform best when the stakes are highest." Outside their barricade, they could hear the Krell assembling for another assault. Heavier weapons this time, by the sound of it. "They're bringing in plasma cutters," reported Rodriguez from his monitoring station. 30 seconds until they breach." Thorne nodded, unperturbed. "Execute environmental modifications. Everyone, oxygen masks on." The atmosphere control systems hummed to life. Temperature plummeted. Humidity skyrocketed. Within seconds, a dense, freezing fog began filling the maintenance level. Fog density at 60% and rising, called Patel. Oxygen levels increased to 28%. Vazix watched in horrified fascination as the humans donned simple breathing masks while distributing others to the diplomats. The temperature is dropping below survivable levels for several species here. "Which is why we're giving them these," Chen explained, handing thermal blankets to the shivering diplomats. "The cold is temporary. The alternative is much more permanent." A tremendous bang echoed as the Krell began cutting through the reinforced door. "Get ready," ordered Thorne, pulling what looked like a primitive lighter from his pocket. "When they breach, they'll charge in expecting to overwhelm us with numbers. They won't be expecting." The door exploded inward. Krell raiders poured through the opening, weapons raised, only to find themselves engulfed in impenetrable, freezing fog. now Thorne shouted. Jackson and Patel hurled their makeshift incendiaries. Thorne flicked the lighter. The oxygen-enriched atmosphere ignited in a controlled but terrifying conflagration that swept through the fog like a living thing, engulfing the Krell raiders in a rolling wave of flame that vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, but not before disabling every piece of Krell equipment caught in its path. The screams of Krell warriors filled the chamber as emergency systems in their suits malfunctioned or shut down completely. Fire suppression systems activated, Rodriguez reported calmly, as if they hadn't just weaponized the very air. Fog dispersing. As the atmosphere cleared, Vazix stared at the scene before them. Krell warriors lay incapacitated, their advanced technology rendered useless by the most basic elements, fire and ice. Impossible, he whispered. No, corrected Ambassador Chen. Just human. Galactic Union reinforcements arrived 4 hours after the initial Krell attack. By then, it was all over. The elite Galactic Union security forces stormed the station, weapons charged and ready, only to find the situation already well in hand. 73 Krell raiders captured. 6 Krell ships disabled and drifting harmlessly in space. All diplomatic personnel safe, if somewhat traumatized. And 5 humans, battered but unbowed, calmly debriefing Commander Vazix, as if they'd just concluded a mildly interesting training exercise. Admiral Corvan, Supreme Commander of Galactic Union forces, strode into the aftermath with the confidence of someone used to taking charge. His ceremonial armor gleamed, untouched by combat, a stark contrast to the disheveled humans with their makeshift bandages and blood-stained uniforms. Commander Vazix. Report. How did you manage to repel a Krell assault force with no military personnel present? The Admiral demanded, his translator struggling to convey the appropriate level of incredulity in his multi-toned voice. Commander Vazix straightened to attention, his exoskeleton clicking softly with the movement. Sir, I did not repel the assault force. The humans did. Admiral Corvan's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme disbelief in his species. The humans? These 5, he gestured dismissively toward Captain Thorne and his team. Impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate humans have only achieved spaceflight within the last century. The Krell have been raiders for millennia. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, somehow managing to look dignified despite a nasty bruise darkening her left cheek. Admiral, with respect, the age of a species' technology says nothing about their capacity to adapt, improvise, and overcome obstacles. Humans have been fighting against overwhelming odds since before we discovered fire. Rodriguez coughed into his hand, which we then promptly weaponized. Patel and Jackson failed to suppress their grins. Admiral Corvan was not amused. This is not a laughing matter. The Krell attack represents the greatest security breach in Union history. Heads will roll for this catastrophic failure. Captain Thorne, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Admiral, if I may offer a perspective? This wasn't a catastrophic failure. It was a valuable lesson. A lesson? What possible lesson could be learned from this disaster? Thorne's expression remained calm, but his eyes held an intensity that made even the Admiral pause. That your security protocols need updating. That relying on reputation rather than readiness is a fatal mistake. And most importantly, he glanced at his team, that humanity is ready to contribute to Galactic Union security in ways you haven't yet considered. The Trill ambassador, whose color had finally settled into a serene lavender, stepped forward. Admiral Corvan, I have served the Union for 70 years. In that time, I have witnessed countless species join our collective. Never, in all those years, have I seen such resourcefulness, such adaptability, such sheer determination as I witnessed today from these humans. One by one, the other diplomatic representatives voiced their agreement. The Morphin had reintegrated into a single entity and now bobbed enthusiastically. They created weapons from the very air, Admiral, from the air. The Vreen's eye stalks quivered with excitement rather than fear, and they fought not just for themselves, but for all of us, even those they had just met. Admiral Corvan's posture slowly shifted from dismissive to contemplative. He turned to Commander Vazix. Your official assessment, Commander. Vazix hesitated only briefly. Sir, humans are classified as coming from a Category 12 Deathworld. Today I learned why that classification exists, and why it is woefully inadequate. These humans aren't just survivors of a harsh world. They're masters of adaptation, capable of turning any environment, even one designed for diplomatic functions, into their natural habitat. He looked at the 5 humans with newfound respect. I believe, Admiral, that the Galactic Union has much to learn from Earth, and much to gain from their alliance. Admiral Corvin studied the humans for a long moment before nodding decisively. Very well. Captain Thorne, Ambassador Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Union, I formally invite Earth to submit an application for full membership status with an expedited review process. He paused, mandibles twitching in what might have been the beginnings of a smile, and perhaps a consultation contract with our security forces. For the first time since the ordeal began, Captain Thorne actually smiled. We would be honored, Admiral. Though fair warning, our consulting fees can be quite high. Worth every credit, murmured Commander Vazix, if it prevents another day like today. Ambassador Chen extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. I believe, Admiral, this is the beginning of a most productive relationship. As Admiral Corvin awkwardly attempted to reciprocate the handshake, the gathered diplomats broke into spontaneous applause, a human custom they had apparently decided to adopt on the spot. Just like that, humanity had arrived on the galactic stage. Not with grand proclamations or technological marvels, but in the way humans had always made their mark throughout their bloody history, by surviving the impossible and making it look like just another day at the office. 3 cycles later. Commander Vazix sat in his newly appointed office aboard the Galactic Union headquarters on Centauri Prime. The promotion had come as a surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Being the first Union official to establish relations with humanity had certain advantages in a political landscape suddenly obsessed with Earth. His desk terminal chimed, indicating an incoming transmission. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing Captain Marcus Thorne's face. The human looked different in his formal military uniform, medals gleaming across his chest. Yet the eyes remained the same, alert, assessing, alive with that peculiar human intensity. Commander Vazix. Or should I say Director Vazix now? Congratulations on the promotion. Vazix clicked his mandibles in the gesture his species used to indicate modest acceptance. Thank you, Captain. Though we both know it was primarily due to my association with your species rather than any particular merit of my own. Thorne laughed. Don't sell yourself short, Director. Not many would have kept their cool surrounded by Krell raiders and trigger-happy humans. You showed admirable composure. I was terrified beyond rational thought, Vazix admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. Though I've had time to reflect on the experience since then. And Thorne prompted, seeming genuinely curious. Vazix leaned forward, his compound eyes catching the light. I've been studying Earth history since our encounter, trying to understand how your species became, what you are. And what are we in your estimation? That's just it, Captain. The more I learn, the less I understand. Your planet should have killed you. By all logical metrics, a Category 12 Deathworld should produce mindless brutes focused solely on survival, not philosophers, artists, and diplomats who also happen to be terrifyingly effective warriors. Thorne nodded thoughtfully. Many species evolve to fit perfectly into their ecological niche. Humans never had that luxury. Earth throws too many curveballs. Vazix's translator struggled momentarily with the idiom before supplying an approximate meaning. Yes, exactly. The sheer variety of survival challenges you faced, it's unprecedented. Most species in the Union evolved in relatively stable environments with predictable threats. While we got everything from ice ages to supervolcanoes, plus several near-extinction events, just to keep things interesting, Thorne finished with a wry smile. It makes for a species that doesn't know when to quit. Vazix tapped a claw against his desk, a nervous habit he'd never quite overcome. The Galactic Security Council is divided about your species, you know. Some see Earth as the greatest military asset the Union has ever encountered. Others fear you'll be the death of us all. And you, Director, what do you believe? Vazix considered the question carefully. I believe that the word Deathworlder misses the point entirely. You're not defined by the death on your world. You're defined by how you've overcome it, time and again. He pulled up a file on his terminal. Did you know that Earth is the only known planet where the dominant species routinely risks death to save members of other species? Your animal rescue organizations alone have challenged every xenobiological theory we have about evolutionary imperatives. Thorne's expression softened slightly. Compassion isn't unique to humans, Director. No, but combining it with your capacity for violence is. That's what the Council doesn't understand yet. They see your warrior nature and assume it defines you. They miss that you fight hardest for others, not for yourselves. Vazix closed the file and faced the human captain directly. The Krell attacked because they believed 5 humans would be easy prey against 50 raiders. That miscalculation will echo through the galaxy for generations. Every species has stories of the day they met their first true challenge, Captain Thorne. For many in the Union, that day was when they met humanity. Thorne nodded, a gesture somehow both humble and proud. We're just glad to be part of the conversation, Director. Earth has been alone for a long time. Not anymore, Vazix assured him. Though I must ask, out of personal curiosity, what exactly happened in Jakarta that your team kept referencing during the crisis? For the first time, Captain Thorne looked slightly uncomfortable. That's classified, I'm afraid. Let's just say it involved similar odds, similar stakes, and similar results. Vazix's mandibles clicked in amusement. Then the Krell were fortunate indeed. More than they know, Thorne agreed. Next time you're near Earth space, Director, you should visit. I think you'd enjoy seeing a Deathworld through the eyes of those who call it home. As the transmission ended, Commander Vazix found himself contemplating the invitation with surprising enthusiasm. A Deathworld, home to the most terrifying and fascinating species the galaxy had ever encountered. And somehow, against all logic and probability, now allies rather than threats. The universe, Vazix reflected, had a peculiar sense of humor, and humanity, it seemed, was the ultimate punchline, a species shaped by death that had emerged as champions of life. He'd need to update the classification system. Deathworlders simply wouldn't do anymore. For humans, perhaps life-givers would be more accurate after all.